Hello frequent flower subscribers, we're back with another month with new flowers and a new design. Let's go. So this month you received Carnations. These are also in the Dianthus family, some Curly Willow, and then also some orange roses. Today here in the video, I am working with Orange Crush, but you will be receiving one of my personal favorites, the Free Spirit. I love the Free Spirit rose. It is a long-lasting rose. It opens up beautifully like a garden rose, has a high petal count, and we use them all the time here in the shop. We're familiar with how it opens, how it lasts, so that's just why it's one of my favorites. But today I'm using Orange Crush just for the example because we don't have our Free Spirits in yet. But let's start designing. I'm going to design in a low cube today. You could certainly use a taller vase if you want to do this, but for this practice, we're going to show you how to create a grid with your Curly Willow to help hold your stems in place. So let's start there. Let's start with our Curly Willow. If Curly Willow is fresh, it's very pliable. So you can move it, bend it, and what we're going to do is just sort of twist up our stem into a circle and then place it down into our vase. So this creates a design element where you're gonna see that Curly Willow in the vase, but it's also going to create a grid for our stems to be placed into. I've got a lot of laterals on this one, so I'm gonna cut a few off just so I have some smaller branches. If the bottom of your stem is really thick, that area becomes less pliable. You can certainly trim it off and just use the tips that are easily bent. We're gonna curl that up. Kind of the more of a mess you have in there, the better. Crisscrossing the stems, kind of making a little nest that they are going to kind of hold themselves into place. And if some are kind of coming up through and even sticking out, that's okay too. Just adds another element to our design. I started with a clean glass of water. I also added my flower food before I did that. If you haven't done that yet, now's the time to do that before we use our stems. So we've got, I'm doing a 10 stem bouquet here. We've got our 5 stems of Carnations and our 5 stems of roses. We're gonna start by cleaning our roses. So depending on the variety of the rose, it can come with a lot of thorns or very little thorns. These here that I'm working with, the Orange Crush, don't really have a lot of thorns, but I'm going to remove any of the foliage that's gonna fall below that water line. Since I'm doing a low and lush arrangement, many of those probably will, so I'm gonna remove most of those stems. If there are thorns, you can go ahead and take your snippers and you can trim off any of those thorns. And then I'm going to remove the guard petals. The guard petals are these outer petals. Those are the first petals that the flower produces. They're protecting it before it's cut just to make sure that those inner petals are protected. So sometimes they're not the prettiest. We typically remove them anytime we're arranging before they go out the door. I think sometimes they can be the most beautiful petals because they can have different shades of colors and depth, but in most cases we're gonna remove them. So we're just gonna remove those guard petals. Typically they just look a little bit more beat up because they've done their job of protecting that rose. And I'm gonna go ahead and do this for all of my stems before we even start arranging. Once we have all those thorns removed and the guard petals, we can try to make these roses open a little bit more if we want to. Typically, if we're doing event work like a wedding or maybe it's for a funeral service, we want those flowers as open and big as possible. For your purpose at home, you probably want to watch them slowly open. But if you are deranging them for a party or something, this is how you're going to get your roses to open more. You're going to remove those guard petals, remove your thorns and your leaves, flip it upside down, and just give it a little bit of a twist. I'm rolling the stem between my hands. What that is doing is just kind of causing movement between my flower petals. You can even kind of gently push it open to really open your rose up. Like I said, you guys are going to be using the Free Spirits. They have so many petal count. They're just beautiful. Typically, we are used to the idea of for a rose to be what they would call tight or sellable, you want to feel, does it feel like it has firmness at the bottom? Garden roses, like the Free Spirit, are still gonna feel firm, but they're gonna open up huge and they're still gonna last. Growers now do this so that the roses you enjoy them longer. Sometimes we'll get complaints from customers saying like, oh, my rose is blown. Like this shouldn't be, it's going to die in no time. And that's not always the case. So ask your florist to know your roses. We are never trying to sell you blown roses, but there are certain varieties now that just open up and stay open before they start to wilt or lose their petals. So Orange Crush is another one like that too. They're very long lasting, but they'll really start to open. And by long lasting for a rose, we're typically meaning about 5 to 7 days. Your typical rose, that's where you're gonna fall. Okay, so we also have green dianthus. These flowers are one of my favorite. They look like little Seussical tufts of green. So if you're familiar with Sweet William in your garden, if you pay attention below the blooms of Sweet William, you'll see these little green tufts. These have been grown now or bred by flower breeders to not have those blooms, but just have the green tufts. They last forever. And we just love them because they're fun. So we're gonna start with basing with our green tricks or green dianthus. So dianthus meaning carnation, they're in the carnation family. I'm going to give my stem a cut and I'm gonna place it through and at an angle. I actually think I'm gonna kind of group my dianthus and group my roses just to give a more of a modern look. You could spread them out however you want to. But I'm just gonna start in this corner and just start grouping my dianthus, giving it a little bit of dimension. Some are going high, removing any foliage. Some are gonna be a little bit higher, some are gonna be a little bit lower. Okay, I've got all my dianthus in place, and now I'm gonna go in with my roses. The other thing about the longevity of a rose, sometimes you'll see them in very modern arrangements where they are cut very short and placed directly down into like the foam. That's called pave style. The shorter the stem, the longer that flower is going to last when it comes to a rose. It doesn't have to work as hard to drink up all the water. So a vase of low, lush roses is probably gonna last longer than a traditional large dozen roses arranged. So just keep that in mind. All right, now I'm gonna go in with my roses. We're gonna go a little shorter with that. Okay, so I've just grouped my roses. I've grouped my Trix Carnations. I'm gonna bring him down just a smidge, just for something modern and fun. If you wanted to try to create this without the grid, you certainly could, and you could leave your Curly Willow tall. If you're designing it in a regular vase, that's one way you could do it as well. But what's really great about it is I can about put my stems just about anywhere in that vase and they're gonna stay still because of that grid. This is a way of using mechanics that's still exposed and becomes a design element. It can be really fun to do that. So there's just our simple cube arrangement. You can place this on your dining room table. You can gift it to a friend. I hope you guys enjoy your frequent flower subscriptions this month. As always, send us your comments, questions, concerns. We love to hear back from you, and we'll see you next month.